I'm gonna be sitting down and talking for a little while here. Something a bit unusual. I feel like I don't talk very broad picture conversations in these videos, especially not in the vlogs, because I like to show and not tell, you know? But I've had something on my mind I just wanted to reflect upon verbally, explicitly, and talk to you about. You watching, not you the camera. Because if you think about it right now, I'm just alone in my room, but that's the weird duality of these, is like, I'm not just the now that I'm thinking about. It's not just me right now filming, but me prolonging this moment and putting it into a context where the now simultaneously is also someone playing it potentially many years in the future. It's quite existentially dread-infusing in some ways. I don't like to think about it too much. Anyway, first ramble. But I'm a pretty introspective person. That's the way I've been raised, to reflect upon my actions, my feelings, my relationships, and to verbalize them, articulate them. My dad's a sociologist and my mom's an anthropologist, and I've just fully been taught completely from childhood to be very observational and very analytical, also of myself. I'm already introspective. I feel like winter is a pretty introspective season where you're like forced inside because it's so cold, you can't spend time outside. The borders kind of between you and the world thicken up and you're forced to look inside yourself. You're forced to spend a lot of time with yourself. Everything is packed in and looking in on itself and being very like shielded and guided away from the outer world. In my interpretation, this is my little world, my little narrative we're in here. I'm introspective. I feel like winter's an introspective season where you're like packed inside yourself and forced to really just spend so much time with yourself. You can't escape out into the world the same way. You have to put layers and layers upon like shielding yourself from the world. And then folks were in the middle of a global pandemic. I don't know if you know this, but yeah, fun fact. It's also happening in Denmark, which is where I live. And we're on a pretty strict lockdown, and have been for like 3 months. All non-essential stores are closed. A lot of kids haven't been going to school, and that means a lot of job opportunities are gone. It means a lot of like potential network events are closed, of course. We're not allowed to meet up with more than 5 people. There are a lot of restrictions, there are a lot of rules, there's a lot of fear. And all of this makes sense. It's all in the big picture of securing everyone's health. Of course, I'm for that. I'm just in this space to kind of reflect upon how I'm doing and what reality I'm living, which is impacting me, and how I articulate that to you as an audience through my videos. So it's like I'm in this weird space in terms of documenting my life, because I'm not living the same day over and over again, but like the same moments and the same emotional space and the same behavioral patterns of like, it's very cyclical at the moment. Like, I make tea, I go for walks, I write in my journal, I listen to music, I maybe meet up with Lage, and I do like a creative project, I do my silly little tasks in my silly little room, and that's kind of it. That's the frame of reference right now. And honestly, it's not that far off from what my life normally looks like. But it's the lack of potentially changing that which is affecting me, I think. And the current situation is enhancing a lot of what I'm already prone to do. I think for most of us it is, pulling us into our inner emotional pulling us into our inner emotional turmoils, or, you know, patterns and cycles. And for me, one of my patterns or cycles is to be introspective and is to be very self-aware. And I feel like when there's no input, it just becomes thinking about overthinking about overthinking about overthinking. And there's no real way out of that. And that's, I think, where also my videos come in. I make these videos as a very therapeutic practice for myself. It's literally, if you think about it, a way of me controlling the narrative about my own life. I choose what I film, I choose which angle I film from, what moments to edit out. I can remove myself stuttering, I can choose not to film in an uncomfortable moment, and I edit it together. And what was I saying with that? I don't know. It's a way of breaking out of that cycle a little bit of just running around in circles and biting my own tail and just consuming myself over and over again. I also realized that I guess I'm perceived as this very happy and content and light-hearted person who's just very in tune with the world and who's very present. Which is fair, because that's what I enhance a lot in these videos, and my videos are a way of enhancing that part of myself. It's a way of like diving into that way of being and noticing. I had Flora Wilds, one of my honestly favorite contemporary artists. You should follow them on Instagram. She had an Instagram story where part of what she wrote out was that her work is about the labor of looking. I just really love that concept. It really resonated with me. I feel like so much of what I like to do really is to look, which is an overlooked practice of paying attention. But just to say, like, I'm also going through it. And not in that kind of way of like really big name celebrities crying in their mansions about being bored. I feel like in the beginning it comes in waves, right? And it's changed so much. This whole experience, I feel like, has different chapters and different sections within those chapters of, like, in the beginning, last spring, literally a fucking year ago. Wow. Almost. In the beginning, like, the public narrative about what is this experience, what's happening to us, in Denmark at least, but also in internet culture, just becomes like a collective discourse of like the world. Everyone with internet access is part of that discourse. Is really interesting. Anyway, that's a different tangent, I digress. In the beginning, I feel like in Denmark and in internet discourse, we had this collective story of like this really sudden, huge thing that was affecting everyone, and in almost the same way. We hadn't gotten into the gritty nuances of how it affected different people differently. And so there was this story of like, this is the pandemic experience, you know, this is what's happening to all of us. Everyone has gone to the supermarket and not been able to find what they wanted to buy because someone hoarded all the toilet paper. Everyone has started to bake sourdough, and everyone is getting bored, and everyone is learning how Zoom works. You know, there were at least like common experiences across the board that were being expressed as like the universal experience. And then since then, in the beginning, a lot of people like really expressed a lot of like, oh, this is what's happening. We're making this story about the pandemic. We're going out into the empty streets. Look at this. This is such a huge monumental experience, and we're happy to document it. This is so grand. This is so weird and strange. Within like the first month, people were like making these like quarantine memes and talking about the quarantine experience, which is quite sweet in some ways. And then after this huge narrative that it was a collective experience, it kind of started branching out into the realities of how different lives people live and how it affects everyone differently, like completely depending on what their life situation is. And so it branched out into those, and it branches out further from those stories and further and further and further until it's practically impossible to kind of put this umbrella term or this umbrella narrative on top of that and say, this is the pandemic discourse, this is the pandemic experience. Like this universalism of saying, this is what everyone's going through right now. All of that to say, I hope you're following, but all of that to say, I'm not saying, like, sharing a little bit of my experience like those celebrities being bored in their mansions. Hopefully it doesn't come off that way. It's more like an undercategory of an undercategory of an undercategory of all these different actions of myself and actions of others and predetermined situations that I've been put in, my privilege and my class and my nationality and the area I live in within Denmark and the generation I'm a part of and the platforms I use to express myself through and the technology I have available. All of these different factors that shape and create the little bubble, the context that I'm within. And that's what I'm speaking on is I already was a person before this, affected by a lot of different contexts I found myself in, and now I'm reflecting on how this context specific to me affects me. Did that make sense? This is why I don't talk a lot in videos, more reflectively, because I can just go on. I'm a talker. I talk a lot. And a lot of this time right now reminds me a lot of the period where I was 19 turning 20. I started university. I moved to a town where the university was located close to Copenhagen, where all of my co-students were living in Copenhagen and had their established networks and had their established lives in Copenhagen, and I lived outside of that. And I didn't have an established life already or network or like all these things going on, so my life was just so much of me being alone with myself and me being alone. And I love being alone. It's my favorite activity to just be in my own bubble and to choose what I do on my own terms with myself. I'm an only child, if you can tell. And I love being alone, but I think a lot of people also realize this during the pandemic, during lockdowns, during quarantines, that it's like, it's about choosing to be alone, being intentionally alone. And I can't choose to be alone right now. I'm out of control of so many aspects of my life right now that I've taken for granted in the past. But in the past, I've also been out of control of choosing to be alone before. Like at university, the first year, like 2018, I was alone involuntarily so much. And it pushes you into like a state of hibernation, really, it does, and of survival, to not choose your own life. I'm getting emotional over it. I cry pretty freely. It's not a huge deal for me to cry, but still, it's like embarrassing still, whatever. But I'm an only child. I've moved around a lot, so I don't have a childhood town or home. I don't have childhood friends. I'm not tied to a place. I don't have that sense of belonging. So what I'm always relying on to anchor myself is my own presence and my own company. And I found these videos of me as a kid. I was 11, 12, and I was talking to the camera I had at the time, like a Nikon Coolpix my parents gave me, and I was using this camera as a companion. It was before social media, so I wasn't filming to perform for anyone. I didn't have an audience in mind. I was literally talking to the camera as though it were a friend of mine, like an extra set of eyes that I could share my experience with. And using it to kind of talk out loud in my own space. And it was really like emotional for me to see those videos, because it's so much of who I am now still, and so much of what I do now still, of me spending time in my own company, making up my own world, kind of diving into my interests, indulging whatever is on my mind. I wasn't like bullied or lonely as a kid in the traditional sense, apart from being an only child moving around a lot. In that period where I found the videos from, I had a lot of friends. I was pretty socially well established, so it wasn't that I had no one to turn to or that I was desperate for company. It was just nice to share that space and that moment with someone, I think. I wanted to honor that part of what I'm doing. Is so much of like feeding my inner child and staying with what makes me happy and growing these implicit worlds.
And that's my dad.
I'm struggling a bit with documenting my life right now, because so much of what is happening is on the inside. So much of what is happening is implicit, and it is emotional, and it's it's happening in here and in here. So I'm thinking about how do I still do that, because so much of YouTube as a platform and vlogging as a format is about very explicit outer world things. Traditionally speaking, vlogging is about already established personas who have very exciting lives that are very different from yours, defined by external factors. Not to say that my life isn't different from yours, but I think relatively to a lot of people within the genre who have defined it and who are very preeminent, is that a word? Live quite different lives from everyday people. And in that relative sense, I'm closer to you than they are. And I'm documenting things that are more boring. But it is a platform that's very fast moving, and it's about grabbing people's attention. It's about being entertaining. So it's strange for me a little bit to be on this platform and to kind of in a way work against what is an essential characteristic of this platform. This isn't like rehearsed, and it isn't really going any certain direction. It's just a lot of reflections on like, what am I doing with this platform? Why am I here? And how am I feeling right now? And how is that feeding into the content that I'm making? Because I guess I just wanted to say a little bit more about why I am here and who I am and what has shaped my approach to making videos. And I hope this makes sense. I hope this adds to your experience of my videos, and I hope it makes you feel a little bit less alone and a little bit less like you should be doing better. I know it's easy to compare, but I hope that my videos don't give you the sense that you should be living my life or that you should be like me, and that instead it makes you feel like you should be more of whoever you are, because that's what I want you to feel. I don't think I have a natural way of rounding this off. I want to leave this thread open because I want to come back to it, and I want to explicitly reflect a little bit more, because that is so much of what I'm doing right now. That's so much of where my head is at, and it feels really good to say out loud. I have a lot of long talks with Lerke about it primarily, but I feel like anyone I'm in contact with, I'm like pouring my heart out to them a little bit, which is also daunting and a little bit embarrassing. But that's really where I'm at. Like, I can work as much as I want on myself and work on being more social and more open, but if I'm literally not allowed to see people, where does that get me, you know? So just to not put all the pressure on myself and remember that I'm living through a global pandemic running on the 11th month for my country. A year ago I was in London with my friends at design school that I no longer attend. I can recognize my privilege and my luck, and simultaneously recognize my negative emotions. Those two don't cancel each other out, and they are not contradictory. Emotions are not always rational. They're not always tied to what you actually know, you know? The way that you act on those emotions, that's your choice. And that's what shapes... I'm not gonna keep such a like podcast voice of me like trying to make a big point at the end. I'm not gonna try to. Enjoy the rest of this video. I went for a walk in a really nice winter sunset. It was very, very beautiful. I was listening to Phoebe Bridgers and like Sufjan Stevens and Hosier. Good moody times. And I picked some dried flowers and I made a snow vase out of it, and then I made dinner. And I hope you enjoy following my life. And I'm gonna put it in this video because I feel like it's an extension and an exemplification of what I was saying. Sorry for using so many big words, it's just how I speak. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm really, really grateful for everyone who watches. I feel very seen and very held by all of you guys. Did that make sense? My camera's overheating. Girl, me too.